Okay, thank you very much. Welcome back. We are jumping my agenda slightly. We're going to go to item 9B at North Lopham, and we have Sarah Roberts, the agent, sitting here, and Councillor William Nunn. So with that, I will hand over to Naomi, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. So this application seeks permission for the erection of one detached two-storey, three-bedroom dwelling with the parking and turning. The proposal seeks to utilise the existing access off the street. So just to run through these slides, you can see the application site there and the location plan. I'll just say in respect of the location plan, the applicant has made reference to an adjacent parcel of land within the application submission, indicating that two new dwellings are under construction immediately to the north of the site. Outlines of the approved dwellings are shown on both the proposed block plan and the location plan. In addition, the submitted planning statement refers to the adjacent parcel of land and provides an aerial shot of the site and wider area, with the adjacent site annotated as site of two new houses. Upon looking into this further, it is acknowledged that the planning permission was granted for two new dwellings on the adjacent plot in January 2015. The application was assessed in accordance with national and local planning policy, which has since been superseded. The decision notice states at condition 1 that the development must be begun no later than the expiration of 3 years, beginning with the date of the permission. When a site visit was undertaken in respect of the current application, it didn't appear that works on the adjacent parcel of land had commenced. In addition, there is still a pre-commencement condition relating to the requirement of an archaeological written scheme of investigation to be submitted, which has not been discharged. Given that work should not commence until all pre-commencement conditions have been discharged, and with no evidence submitted as part of this application to suggest otherwise, the local planning authority are of the opinion that works on the adjacent site have not commenced. Any works that may have been undertaken would be unlawful, and the planning permission has now expired. So moving on through the site and
okay,
wider
can I just
context.
hold you there? Were members fully aware of what that statement was? Okay.
So
I know the site, so and I'm fully aware of this, and I know my vice chairman is as well. So can we sort of break that down?
So as a breakdown, where you can see the dotted lines to the north there on that location plan showing the position of two new dwellings, that planning permission has now expired. And it was granted planning permission under an old policy, under an old set of policies which have now been superseded. And there were pre-commencement conditions which were attached to that planning permission, and they have not been discharged. So the permission is now considered to be expired.
Members' understanding of that? Okay, thank you very much. Carry on, please, Naomi.
Apologies. And moving on to the rest of the sites, this is the site and the wider context. You can see it is predominantly a built-up residential area. And this is the site in relation to the settlement boundary. It is within the settlement boundary. This is the site plan showing the proposed dwelling in the front garden to the street. And this is the proposed elevation plans, ground floor plans, first floor plans. These are the site photos facing east across the site and facing southeast and facing southwest. You can just see the host dwelling there to the side. And this is a view west across the site with the host dwelling there in the background. And this is a view towards the proposed dwelling location. And this is a view showing the openness of this part of the conservation area. You can see the host dwelling in the centre with the existing dwellings set back either side. And this is the street scene view looking south along the street towards the application site. The markers there show the nearest neighbouring dwelling to the north, which is set back approximately 23.4 metres from the public highway. And in contrast, the dwelling would be set back 9.3 metres from the public highway. And this is the street scene view looking north along the street towards the application site. You can see that dwelling there set 23.4 metres back. And then the dwelling the other side of the application site is set back from the public highway by approximately 27.9 metres. And again, the arrow marks 9.3 metres approximately where the new dwelling would be located on the approach along the street. So, and then back to the location plan. So during the assessment of the application, no heritage statement was submitted and little information was given within the submission in terms of addressing the impact of the proposal on the existing character and appearance of the conservation area. On this basis, during the assessment of the application, it was considered, the proposal was considered contrary to policy ENV 07 of the Breckland local plan. Whilst the planning statement refers to the proposed 1.5 stories, the dwelling as a 1.5 story, given the proposed height of the dwelling at approximately 7.9 metres, it is considered to be 2 stories in height, albeit the rooms are built into the roof space. The proposal, therefore, is for a modest sized 2-story, 3-bedroom detached dwelling with on-site parking and amenity space provision. The settlement pattern of North Loppen is generally low-density, linear, street-fronting development. In the vicinity of the application site, existing dwellings on both sides of the site are set back in their plots, providing an open and spacious frontage and green context to this part of the conservation area and street scene. The immediate dwelling to the north of the site is set back from the public highway by approximately 23.4 metres, as already said, whilst the dwelling immediately adjacent to the site to the south is set back by approximately 27.9 metres. In comparison, the proposed dwelling, which would be located in between the above mentioned plots, would only be set back from the public highway by approximately 9.3 metres. It would therefore fail to integrate to a high degree of compatibility with its direct neighbours in terms of layout and would appear disjointed in the immediate street scene. Further along the road, where occasional dwellings are closer to the street frontage, they comprise historic period properties. Putting a new dwelling in this location will erode the green open setting of this part of the conservation area and street scene and appear incongruous with neighbouring plots which are set back from the highway with large frontages. As one approaches the site from the south, the dwelling will have a hard edge in terms of the side elevation of the dwelling, which will be set well forward from the neighbouring 3 plots to the south. There is an area of open land to the north, and then the proposal will sit forward of the next property located to the north. This is considered out of character and detrimental to the street scene, especially the approach to the site from the south. It would not conserve nor enhance the existing open characteristics of the designated conservation area, contrary to policy ENV 07 of the Breckland local plan. It is therefore considered that the introduction of a dwelling as shown on the submitted plans would have an adverse impact on the character and appearance of the conservation area, the street scene and the character of the area. Whilst the local planning authority acknowledged that no objection has been raised by the historic buildings officer, it is the planning officer's role to look at the street scene and pattern of development and reach a recommendation on the application. In light of this, it is considered the introduction of a modern detached 2-story dwelling in this location will erode the openness of the existing street scene, appear incongruous with the neighbouring plots, which are set back from the highway with large frontages, and will fundamentally fail to preserve or enhance the character and appearance of the North Loppen conservation area. In terms of the impact on amenities, whilst it is noted that there are 1st floor windows which face head on towards habitable rooms, of the existing host dwelling, given the separation distance of approximately 20 metres between the east elevation of the existing dwelling and the west elevation of the proposed dwelling, it is considered that the relationship of the proposed two-storey dwelling to neighbouring dwellings, particularly the host dwelling and private open space, is broadly acceptable when having regard to visual dominance, loss of light, overlooking and overshadowing considerations. Furthermore, it provides adequate amenity space for future occupants of the new dwelling. It is concluded that the proposal will maintain an acceptable level of residential amenity for existing and future occupants in line with the requirements of policy COM 3 of the Breckland Local Plan. In terms of highway safety, no objections have been raised by the local highway authority. In addition, the submitted plans show sufficient on-site parking provision for future occupants of the dwelling, and the provision of a shed to the rear of the garden would provide safe storage for bicycles. In terms of ecology considerations, given the location and characteristics of the site, it is accepted that this could be conditions as part of any forthcoming planning permissions, having due regard to net gains requirements. In terms of nutrient neutrality considerations, these have been satisfactorily dealt with during the application process. In terms of GI RAMs, a signed unilateral undertaking has been provided for this scheme, therefore this obligation has been met. In respect of contaminated land considerations, the Contaminated Land Officer has raised no objection to the proposal subject to the inclusion of conditions. Flood risk considerations are considered to be addressed on the basis that the site is in an area identified as being at very low risk of river and surface water flooding and within flood zone 1. In conclusion, it is considered that the siting of a two-storey dwelling in this location would erode the openness of existing street scene, appear incongruous with neighbouring plots which are set back from the highway with large frontages, and would fundamentally fail to preserve or enhance the character and appearance of the North Lopham Conservation Area, which is generally low density, linear street fronting development, and in the vicinity of the application site, existing dwellings on both sides of the site are set back within their plots, providing an open and spacious context in this part of the conservation area. The proposal is therefore contrary to Chapter 16 and paragraph 194 and 130 of the NPPF, policies COM 1, Gen 2 and EMV 07 of the Breckland Local Plan, and Section 72 of the Planning, Listed Buildings and Conservation Areas Act 1990. For this reason, the application is recommended for refusal.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. Yes, before we carry on, Rebecca, you'd like to say a few words?
Thank you, Chairman. So just for members' information, a heritage statement was submitted after the deadline for late documents to be submitted and has not been considered by officers in the determination of this application to date. On this basis, the agent was approached this morning and offered to defer this item from committee today on the basis that that heritage statement hadn't been considered in the deliberation of this application. However, the agent has asked to continue today on the basis that this does not form part of our deliberations, members, and in the determination of this application. And I think the agent's here today to confirm.
Thank you. Ms. Roberts, you're confirming that?
Yes, exactly.
Microphone, please.
It was submitted in time for the late papers. It was submitted on Friday in time for the late papers. Midday on Friday.
Yeah, after midday on Friday it was received.
It was received. It was submitted in the morning. Anyway.
Yeah. Sorry, that's the way the fantastic internet works. I sent a message to my wife the other day and she said, "Where the hell have you been?" I said, "Well, I told you." And she said, "Well, that was 2 hours ago." Anyway, we'll proceed. Are you happy to go ahead?
Yeah.
Yes, please. If you'd like to switch your mic back on, thank you. And you have 3 minutes, please.
The reason for refusal is the officer's view that the proposal would erode the openness of the street scene in this part of the conservation area. However, the significance of the conservation area is already fragmented around the site.
Julie.
Pictures which are included in our design and access statement, I don't know if they can be shown, illustrate the assessment. In terms of listed buildings, there is none within visible range of the development. The built environment is of a lower quality in the immediate area as compared to more attractive parts of the village further south. The conservation of area, which was set in 1976, encompasses a street scene which has been eroded in its value in the immediate area. The officer says the siting would appear disjointed in the immediate street scene, incongruous with neighbouring plots, fundamentally fail to preserve or enhance. However, there is a varied street scene to both sides and opposite the proposal, which is a pink bungalow. Within 165 metres of the site on both sides of the road are houses, both historic and modern, as close as 5 metres back from the road, whereas the proposal house is in fact 14.4 metres back from the road. The 9.3 referred to by the officer is from the site boundary, which is 5 metres back from the highway. Surely historic houses being close to the road and some modern houses being close to the road implies this form of urban development is suitable for the conservation area. We've checked distances of various historic and modern houses and found them to be 5 metres, 6.4, 8.5 metres, etc. The proposal house is 14.4 metres back. The 1.5 storey house has a height of 1 metre above its first floor to its eaves. We acknowledge there is a significant difference in impact between a room in the roof house and a 2-storey house, which is what has led to the 1.5 storey design for the proposal. The officer's report says the neighbouring permission was assessed in accordance with national and local planning policy, which has since been superseded. Please advise which particular policy has changed materially. The heritage policy in place at that time, DC 17, is superseded by ENV 07. With fundamentally similar wording and intention, we see no change to these policies, which would reverse the assessment of our site compared to the previous permission on the neighbouring site. Regarding the green open setting of this part of the conservation area and street scene, there is currently no planting along the site frontage, but in 2009 there was a Leylandii hedge. This is a typical approach to frontages along the village street and could be reinstated without permission. Alternatively, hedge planting could be reinstated as part of a landscape condition if preferred. The highway's boundary is 5 metres back from the road edge and includes a pavement. Therefore, a new boundary hedge would not impede highway's visibility. In conclusion, this particular section of the North Lopham Conservation Area does not offer either openness or historic character. Both historic and modern development of the village have employed street frontages, and there is a tradition of 1.5 storey dwellings. On balance, infill of this disused frontage plot will help to tie together the housing along the street, thereby actually contributing to enhancement and preservation of the conservation area.
Well done. You owe me 35 seconds. No, it doesn't, not anymore. Well, there's a long while ago, yeah, but I go back a long while, so no, it doesn't work now.
Can I pass photos to members so they can pass them along while I'm talking?
How many photos are there? 3, okay. Give them to Peter first, he'll pass them around, and then Harry will pass them across to Philip. One at a time, keep them going as you go. Have a look, Peter, pass 1, so you're not passing 3. Pass 1, that's it. Keith, pass 1, pass 1, pass 1. Okay, off you go.
Thank you, Mr.
3
Chairman.
minutes.
As we've already heard, the principle of development has been supported here both by the council, previously by the parish boundary. We know that we've had the application next door, albeit it's been rescinded, and I know that's being challenged because the footings for those 2 that you saw that have already been in, built by RG Carter, so they're reasonably confident that they've got their permissions correct. The proposed site, as you can see from those 3 photos, are surrounded by very modern houses that are in very close to the road. I know the photos you were shown by the officers showed, it was a bit like the BBC, some very selective photos showing long distance properties away from the road, but actually all of the surrounding properties, including the bungalow opposite, are almost touching the road. And one of them is literally, you can reach out from the path. We hear much about linear development of Lopham. I've lived in Lopham my whole life, all 57 years. And when I was a boy, it was a linear development. But almost the entire village now is both 2 or 3 properties deep. In fact, the farm directly opposite, or just opposite, owned by this family, has been included in our new local plan and adopted, where the boundary will allow probably 4 or 5 houses deep, directly opposite this property. The property itself is a self-build for the couple sitting to my right. They're the 4th generation farmers in the village, trying to stay as part of the farm and on the farm. Dad lives in the bungalow that's directly behind them, so whilst it might annoy him, he's accepted it. Not a single person in the village, from the parish council to the district councillor to a resident, has complained or made any representations on this. I should reiterate what the officer said, that the historic buildings officer had absolutely no objections, which I would take as he's supportive of this application. Thank you for passing around my pictures. And finally, whilst I recognise again that the 2 properties are being challenged by our officers, I think in the past, and it wasn't that long ago, we did show that we were supportive of properties quite near to the road, in fact, much closer to the road than the one that's being proposed. So as you can hear, I'm here to support this property, and I hope that you can also support what is a self-build 1.5-storey property for a farmer's daughter in the village. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Sorry, stop me clock. So that particular one is opposite. Members had this. That was the one that was directly opposite. This one is showing 1.5 stories, or is this near it?
Again, that's just opposite, right?
Yeah, opposite and to the right. So very close proximity to the site. And this particular one?
The historic buildings that were mentioned by the officers, that is one of the historic buildings, and as you say, it's right on the road. And beside that historic building, we passed a property a few years back, which has now been built directly off the road.
Okay,
Beside the historic building.
that's terrific. Thanks very much. Okay, it's open to questions from members, please. Councillor Crane, then Councillor Kittle-Morris.
Thank you, Chairman. I would have liked to have seen the blue line drawing. I was confused at the beginning, as you know, but and I understand now about the 2 properties that have been started to build, but a lot have expired their planning permission, which is interesting that was brought to our attention, but you know, I can understand why. But what about the house behind this plot? Is that part and parcel in the ownership of the farm or the applicants, please?
Councillor Nunn.
The dwelling directly behind is the applicant's father, the farm owner.
Just ask about blue line. Yeah, it's not in the blue line. It is standalone application. Although the host, as we've classed as the host dwelling, is the land that's been donated to a family member, I gather. Okay, so it would not be under any hold to that. Councillor Kittle-Morris, please.
Put up the original overhead view from Google Earth, please, so I can have a look at the street scene in its entirety.
Oh, sorry. Google Earth. There, that one. Yes, microphone on, otherwise we won't be able to hear you.
So can I ask Councillor Nunn where those photographs originated from with reference to the overhead view? Just to be clear. Yeah, that's fine.
One of the houses is this one. These are the historic buildings to the
That's what questions are for. Do we have any other questions from members? Councillor Wilkinson and then Councillor Kyber.
Yeah, I was just going to say on that overhead angle that the red line goes into the driveway, is that going to be as it is, or there's going to be highway splays put in? Is that, I don't quite understand why the red line's going to cross the driveway. And obviously highways haven't objected, and I just wondered if there was a footpath there outside going along, or and any extra displays need to be put in.
Councillor Wilkinson, obviously the application is recommended for refusal, so we haven't planned for any additional displays or anything because we've recommended the application for refusal. Obviously, in the event that members disagree with that recommendation, we would need to seek highways comments for appropriate conditions for things like visibility displays.
Councillor Kyber, please.
Could we have another look at the proposed elevations, because 7.9 metres is excessive for a 1.5 storey.
Are you happy with that understanding of it? Do you want to see floor plans as well, or we've got it up? A microphone, please, if you're going to comment.
It's just trying to visualise how big that roof space is to get to 7.9 metres, but proportions aren't sort of conservation area-ish.
Can we just go to floor plans? That might help. To the agency, I gathered some of those, yeah. If you notice the little squares with all the little dots around, that is actually roof space, yes, so it will obviously go up from there. So that will be walls and then, yep, that's fine. Okay, sorry, covered. No, covered. Any further questions, please, from members? No, okay, thank you very much. Okay, so we're on North Lopham, 3PL 2022-0739F. Your officer's recommendation for this one is one of refusal. Could I have a show of hands for refusal, please? 3. And those against that recommendation? 7. Okay. From the floor, could I? From the floor, Councillor Bowes, could I have your reasons for you possibly needing to recommend for an approval?
Thank you. Yes, I'd like to propose that we approve this application for the following reasons: that it is in the settlement boundary and it does fit in with the street scene in the immediate area.
Over to our solicitor.
That contrary to the officer's view, you do not feel that you require a heritage statement to conclude that the proposal does enhance or improve the conservation area.
That's what you wanted to say as well, but we're tongue-tied. Okay, could I have a seconder, please, for that? I'll have to Councillor Crane. So recommendation from the floor then is that, which I have got a proposer and a seconder, is that we approve this item at North Lopham. Could I have a show of hands for approval, please? Yeah. Okay, and those against that? 3. Okay, and all conditions are related to the officer's forward process on this, including highways. Okay, thank you very much. This item's approved. Okay, we're going to go to item 9A, which is at Harling, which is 3PL 2022-0781. And we've got Chris into the chair. I'm just swapping them over, Councillor Nunn, so I can get rid of Chris. I mean, allow Chris to go and do other work. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Chair.
bear with me. Oh. Chairman. Oh, I never do. Apologies and thank you, Chairman. So yeah, we're off to Harling now and 7 Hamblings Piece. So the application seeks retrospective permission for the erection of fencing located to the site and curtilage boundaries. We can get a flavour of where the site is from that aerial image here. So it's on the corner of Hamblings Piece. So further kind of idea of where we sit in terms of the site and its context. So yeah, we're in a modern residential area towards the southern edge of Harling. So we have the Lopham Road to the south here, and then Hamblings Piece runs off that, and then you enter a modern post-war housing estate. So we predominantly single stories with 1.5-storey properties. We can see the smaller plan forms there. It's a single story properties predominate, and we've got open landscape frontages which predominate as well, largely. So in terms of the proposals, the fencing now erected sits in the shown by the red line, so around the edges here to the boundary of the site with Hamblings Piece and the footpath. Give you an idea of the site. So here's the dwelling here on the frontage here. So the fencing runs here, we'll see in a moment. Along the boundary, we can see the properties in the surrounding area. Just give you an idea of what was previously there in terms of the boundary. So hedgerow here, property is just here. So this is what we're considering today. So we see elements of the hedgerow retained beyond the rear. So it's seeking retrospective full consent for the fencing as erected. In terms of, you can see trellising added here and climbing plants added as well. Touching more detail on that shortly. Another image there. And there's just to give you an idea of the character of residential area within which the site sits. So the application site is on the right hand side here. So look towards the Lopham Road there. That's another view. See the character generally. And there's some, this is actually the Lopham Road running there. We've got examples of fencing here. So that's just to show you, give you a flavour of the surrounding area. So yeah, I mean, you'll see from the report, the parish council have raised no objections. We have had comments, one in support and one objection. Those objections do relate to the impact of the proposals as now built. Obviously, also from the report, you'll see the history behind this. So there was a previously withdrawn application. Concerns were raised by officers in terms of the impact of the fencing on the character and appearance of the street scene. Now that was withdrawn, and the applicants have added the trellis. I'll go back to the images. So they've added trellising and climbing plants to help soften the fencing. They've also reduced it in height. Now, as a result of that, the parish council have raised no objections. They did comment adversely on the original application, but have since removed their objections on this current application. So in terms of some of the history, this has been before the chairman's panel. Our officers still raise concerns about the design and its impact on the street scene as it was now. Since then, it was being recommended for refusal. And since then, discussions have taken place and the applicants have agreed to provide some further trellis and climbing planting along the side boundary here to help soften the fencing from Hamblings Piece, as we can see here. And subject to those further additions, it's considered that overall the proposals will now not cause overriding harm to the character and appearance of the streets, and that's also obviously having regard to examples in the surrounding area, and obviously what was previously there in terms of the hedging being softer but providing that kind of
closing of the street scene. You'll see other issues in terms of amenity. There's not considered to be any adverse impacts on amenity, and the Highways Authority have raised no objection from a safety point of view. They have requested an informative, and it's not included in the list at the bottom of the conditions. So it's recommended that informative is added there to just the informative purpose is to highlight that any structures, planting, fencing, walls, whatever within the public highway are not allowed. It's a public highway, and they would require obviously consent from the Highways Authority. So yeah, in terms of the proposals before you, it's been recommended for approval subject to that condition. The conditions on 96 and 97 of the report, with obviously that condition requiring some further trellis and planting. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, councillor Nunn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't wish to say much to this.
Okay, thank you.
It is almost that brief. The condition that has been imposed has already been carried out by the applicant. The new trellising and the planting has already been done. And as you heard, that the height has been reduced. I know it's been quite a long conversation from the officers and the applicant, but I think all parties are now happy that we've got to a place where everyone is happy. So I'm just here to support the application.
Thank you. Open to questions from members. No, that's fine. Okay, we'll take the vote on this. Just to remind you on page 96 that, because it may have been a concern to anyone, that the additional trellising and planting has got 6 months from date of this permission to be installed. And that is covered by, I know the wording's there somewhere. Yeah, Commo 1 and Gen 02, just for your satisfaction on that. So with regards to this item 9A at Harling, 3PL 2022-0781/HOU, your officer's recommendation is approval. Can I have a show of hands, please? And those against? Oh, sorry, we had hands going up and down at the same time. Sorry, can I have a show of hands for approval, please? Thank you. Sorry. And those against? 1. Okay, thank you. This is approved. Thank you very much. We will move on now or move back, should I say, to 8C at Quidnam, 3PL 2020-0043/F. And we've got Councillor Nunn with us yet again. It's the Councillor Nunn show this morning. And sorry, is it? Well, don't count the chickens, as they say. Right, okay. And over to you when you get a moment, Rebecca. As I say, talk amongst yourselves. Councillor Kittle-Morris.
Can I just state, Chairman, for clarity, that I was not at the committee meeting where this was sent for a site visit.
Yeah.
So I didn't vote for a site visit. I expect the solicitor will tell me that I'm entitled to listen to the argument this morning and put my hand up or not, depending on whether I feel I've got enough information without a site visit to make a judgment on this application.
Clarification.
Couldn't put it better myself.
I'm in the same position as Mark.
Well, that's a bit different, isn't it? No, sorry.
Okay, over to you then, please, Rebecca.
Thank you, Chairman. So this is an application at Quiddenham Anvil Park Stud. It is a retrospective application. I will read the list out because it is important to the application. So it's to extend the commercial equestrian use to include events. It's for an ancillary use of the PA system. It's for change of use of indoor school to cafe, kitchen and office. It's for use for hiring out facilities. And just for members' information on further consideration of the application, I think that we need a further condition at the end of the report with regards to hiring out of equestrian facilities for equestrian use use only. So apologies for that, I'll take the blame. But certainly if we continue for a recommendation for approval, I propose an additional condition in that regard. For the erection of stables, that's all the stables on the application site. For the use of the old arena as car park, the submission of landscape details, removal of manure and lighting details, and the construction of a new arena. And finally, the construction of an outside exercise area / menage. So members will recall this application was deferred from Planning Committee on the 29th of November in 2021, and members deferred that item for a site visit for this and another application for holiday lodges, which was subsequently brought to this committee and refused. Members who attended the site visit will recall that when we got to the site, the then application description, which is not the description I've read out today, wasn't reflective of the development that had taken place on the site. And therefore we gave the opportunity to the applicant to amend the description, provide amended plans, and we have undertook a reconsultation with all affected parties, including neighbours, the parish council and all statutory consultees. And therefore, it is this description that I've just read out, members, that you are considering today. You will note from the officer report that previously it included 2 other matters of kennels and a forge. They've been subsequently removed from the description of development, and officers are pursuing those items with the applicant independently of this planning application. So they're not for consideration here today. So members, I'll just show you the presentation, or I won't. Yeah, that's what happened. Okay, I'll try that again. I'll just show you the presentation. So here is the application site, Anvil Park Stud, with the green highlighted mark for you. And when you see the location plan, it's kind of a triangular site running down to the south. And as a marker, you can see the Angel Public House at Larling just to the north of the application site, just sort of northwest of the access to the application site, which is that road that's running north with a kink in it. So here is the red line site plan. So you can see that roughly triangular site running down through to the south. And then members, for those of you who visited the site and didn't visit the site, so the key elements of the proposal in terms of what is going on in this site plan. So this here for you members is the old arena. This is now used as car parking, and obviously we've got some photos to show you in a bit. This blue area down here and then shown in the bottom right hand corner, that's the proposed new arena with bunding along the A11. I'll repeat, this is all retrospective, so these works have taken place. The PA and the lighting, you can see by the blue dots, these are all in place as per the site visit. And then members, just to point out, just up here is the new menage, which I've got a photo of to show you in a minute. And then these blocks of development are the stable blocks, which again have all been replaced and are in as currently. So just a further further block plan, apologies, to show you the car park. So that's on the old arena. The new arena is just to the south of it. And then just on to the right hand side of the plan, you can see this area, an existing building. This was the approved riding school. This is where the cafe, the kitchen and the office block sit as part of that building. So we just have some elevations, and I've got some photos for you of the stable blocks, and just to remind you that all the stable blocks on the site have been replaced, and that was one of the matters that we noticed on the site visit. They're all now uniform and matching, and here's the design typical of stable blocks, and the reason the applicant replaced all of them was because the ones that were remaining were flooded. Or more images of the stable blocks, but the members will note from the report that these are low-key, single-storey, timber-clad, very typical of an equestrian use site, and it does have use, permitted use as an equestrian use site already. And we think that the stable blocks themselves are in character with that overall use of the site. So that's just the images of the stable blocks. And then this is the menage that when we went out on site, we had added to the description, menage or horse walking area as they're calling it, which is just to the northwest of those stable blocks. And then this, members, is the arena, which is already in place with the fencing, and you can see the bund just to the left-hand side of your screen, which is all in place. It's all retrospective. And this is where it sits in that revised location right down to the south of the site. And this is the car park gravelled in replace of the old arena to provide parking for the uses here proposed. And here we are on the location plan. So I've already set out for you, members, that we have done a full consultation on this new description and the amended plans. You'll note from the officer report that the parish council still maintain objections to the proposals on the basis of the concerns that they have done the works retrospectively, that they will fail to comply with conditions, that they are undertaking further works on site in terms of bringing soil and creating banking adjacent to the river, and other objections of concern about operations that have been going up on there, and largely those objections are repeated in the 2 letters of representation. You'll note from the deferred section of the officer report that we are very clear on what we're considering here today. We are merely considering the description of the development. You can only consider the description of the development and the plans in front of you. Any other matters that are taking place on the site will be a matter of either enforcement or regulation. So the matter of bonfires, the storing of soil is not a material consideration for you here today. That's not part of the application description. And specifically with regards to the soil, we are working with the Environment Agency specifically with regards to that matter on this site. But that is not for you to consider here today, members. You'll also note from the officer report that the application is supported by all the statutory consultees, including Environmental Health, the Highways Authority, the Environment Agency. You will not note from the report, and that again, apologies members, but our ecologists have no objections, and they have written in writing and put that in no objection since the publication of the report. So there is no statutory objections, and any recommendations for conditions such as lighting, hours of operation, height, etc., have all been conditioned in accordance with the statutory consultee comments. Members will note from the officer report and a condition at the end of the report that we suggested that we needed further clarification about the hours of operation and the number of events. Given that the Environmental Health have no concern about the number of events, we've just agreed with the applicant to condition the hours of operation. So the events would only take place between 8 AM and 9 PM, and that would be supplemented in condition 10 if members were in approval of the recommendation here in front of you. So members, we think that the uses here that are shown that are all retrospective are sympathetic to the overall equestrian use of the site. It is not located in close proximity to neighbouring properties in any way. We feel that through the application of conditions with regards to the lighting and the PA system, that we would then have a control over this site in the way it's currently being used, and that would allow us to regulate the operations on site. However, we have taken into account the neighbouring uses, including the chicken sheds that you can just see to the right hand side to the east of the screen there, and the lighting available to them, and also the distance from neighbouring properties in reaching our conclusion, as well as the impact on the structures, which are relatively low key and in character with the equestrian uses proposed there. You'll note through the conditions, I've suggested that we added a further condition with the hiring out facilities, so that's for equestrian purposes only. That we add the ecology conditions as set out in the report, that we update condition 10 to reflect those hours of operation, 8 AM to 9 PM. And on that basis, we have recommended this application for approval. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Nunn, please, 3 minutes, sir.
Thank you very much, Chairman. The officer actually covered a great deal of what the parish council is concerned around, and I'm predominantly speaking on behalf of the parish council here this morning. So they remain, as always, concerned about the various elements, as you said, about the retrospective. They're very concerned about the amount of soil that's being dumped there at the moment, 10 lorry loads, 20-ton trucks most days. But I know, again, you've said they can't consider that, but it's something else that's being done. I was on the site visit and I noticed also that the Farrier building that he said he needs to build and is going to construct actually isn't even part of the application. So I guess that's just, again, just highlighting the fact that this particular applicant pays very little regard to what UI or anyone else says and just kind of plows on regardless, and he'll come in for retrospective and well, who knows what he'll do. In terms of the conditions, one of the questions is around the PA and the lighting and the other parts of this waste plan. I know Rebecca said we're not allowed to talk about fires, but one of the conditions is that there can't be any fires on site. And at the moment, there are regular fires on site, both burning manure waste, plastic waste, et cetera, from the site. So whilst we can't consider it, I believe it is one of the conditions that you've actually put in on, and I can't remember which condition, but when I read through the applicant, it is a condition. And I guess my challenge to the officers is you've put a huge raft of conditions in. Are you actually confident you can enforce on them and do something about them as when it happens? And if you get a call at 10 o'clock at night saying there's a fire, are you actually going to do something about it, or just let it burn and then go, you shouldn't have had a fire? So the concern is around the number of conditions and actually the enforceability of those conditions. And whilst we all recognise in the local community there aren't too many houses too close to this particular site, there are some houses quite close to this site who are impacted by both the fire, the light and the noise. If you stand at Larling Station, when the PA system's on, you can listen to it. Now that's some miles from this site, it's very loud. And they actually use it not when the equestrian's on, they use it because if they put the radio through it, they can listen to the radio across the whole site. Now, much as I might like Radio 2 or 4, I wouldn't necessarily want it on all the time in my garden. So again, I come back to the conditions and whether we're actually going to enforce on them. And then one final point, there's concern that at the moment there are 8 dogs, 8 kennels on site. And again, I know it's not part of the application, but there's concern that the site is already being built up to store, store's the wrong word, to house dogs and kennels. I think that's probably enough, Mr. Chairman, just the concern around what's going on at this site.
Thank you very much. Rebecca, you wish to come back on something?
Yeah, thank you, councillor. No, that was really confusing what I said. That was really confusing. So I'd like to come in if that's at all possible. So what I've written and what I meant is there's no conditions to control the bonfires up there currently. We have, as a recommendation for environmental health, added the condition, but that would be solely in relation to those matters listed in condition 7, so matters that are subsidiary to this application. With regards to the enforcement of condition members, that is a power to us as a local planning authority. That is not a material consideration to your deliberations today. Currently, we don't have the conditions in front of you to enforce against the development. The question that you need to consider today here, members, is would these conditions make this development acceptable? And we believe that with this respective application, that these conditions do make the application acceptable and allow us the ability to go up there and regularize the site if needed. And finally, just with regards to the forge, that has been removed from the application site. The applicant already has planning permission to have a forge up there, and that's listed in the report, and we've made him aware of that, and we're offering him the opportunity to use out his old permission in that regard, and that's why it's been removed from this application. And with regards to the kennels, the dogs that are up there are the applicant's dogs. They are their dogs living on the site, and they're not going to pursue the commercial kennels element, and that's why that's been removed from the application. Obviously, if those matters were to go on up the site, we do have enforcement powers, but that is not a material consideration to this application at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. It's open to questions from members. Councillor Kybird, please.
On the site visit, we noticed hookup points for overnight use by camper vans. Is that now precluded by the hours of operation?
That is not part of this application. They would need a separate planning permission. Obviously, under the Caravans and Campers Act, they could have up to 5 up there without needing planning consent. So it doesn't necessarily need planning permission, but it is not part of the application in front of you today, councillor.
Councillor Crane, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a quick one, because I heard Councillor Nunn talk about the radio being on. I'm assuming that the PA system will only be approved to be used when there is events taking place, and that there won't be a radio blaring out all the time. And that does concern me for any neighbours. And the other thing is, I am concerned that this opening hours of 8 AM until 9 PM, is that 7 days a week?
I would have preferred to have seen it restricted to so many calendar days, so many days a year, but hey ho.
Rebecca?
Sorry, councillor Kane, I was just seeing what the condition says. So the condition requires, sorry, I'll tell you what the condition number is. That the development accords with the noise assessment undertaken. But if you would like it to be more restricted about what they play, but I think the point that I would make is it's the level of noise from the PA system that's acceptable, not what they're playing. So we could restrict the PA system to only be in use when there are events. We could absolutely do that. And I think that would be appropriate to do that. The other question was about the hours of operation. The reason we're not limiting the number of events per year is because our environmental health don't have an objection to the number of events, only the hours that they're taking place. And although I get your point and had the same feeling, i.e. why you read it in the way you read it in the report, it's just that a lot of the events do take place on weekends and things like that, because we're restricting the numbers, but actually the impact is on weekends, and that's what's been considered environmental health through the noise assessment and the traffic movements, etc. So on that basis, we are not seeking to limit the amount of events. That's really important that members take that into consideration in their deliberations.
So can I come back and confirm that there will be a condition that PA system is only used when there are events on, not to blare music, etc., right, to irritate everybody else in the vicinity? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Wilkinson, please.
Yeah, I was just going to say what Councillor Crane said, and I believe that if Radio 4 and Radio 2 is licensed broadcasting stations, there would be broadcasting rights they are breaking as well. So that somebody needs to remind them.
Okay, thank you. No further question. Oh, Councillor Kittle-Morris.
Abstaining because I don't think I have enough information to make a judgment without having been on a site visit.
Okay, fine. No further questions. Thank you, members. So we go to the vote on item 8C, 3PL 2020-0043/F at Quidnam. Your officer's recommendation on this item is one of approval. Could I have a show of hands, please? 7, and those against? 1. Are you abstaining, Councillor Doigan?
Yes, I'm abstaining on so.
Right, thank you. 7, 1, 2. That's right, good. Okay, thank you very much. This item is approved. You can do some proper work now. Oh, no, you don't. Okay, we're going to move on now. We've got our next item is item 9C. Oh, Matthew.
I thought you said you were going to do Field Maple Road now.
Oh, yeah, because I've got to get, yep, sorry, got Naomi here. Sorry, darling. Sorry, Field Maple Road 9D, 3PL 2022-0296/F. Got James Watling, who's an objector, along with Lucinda Scott James, Andrew Clark, who's the agent, and then we've got a letter from the ward rep to be read out. So if you'd like to come and sit on the right-hand side, please. That's 3PL 2022-0296/F. Just to make notification, I have had representation on this item. I gather other members have received. Thank you. And just to confirm, Mr. Watling, you wish your time to be reduced to 1 minute so that Ms. Scott James can have 2 minutes. Is that no? Oh.
1 minute.
And you'll have the 2. Well, how gentlemanly of you. Yeah, 2. And she's 1. Okay, thank you. When you're ready, Naomi.
Thank you, Chairman. So this application seeks full planning permission for the erection of 4 dwelling houses, all 2-storey. Run through the slides with you. The application site is at Field Maple Road in Watton. The application site is within the settlement boundary of Walton, as you can see from the slide there. This is the location plan. You can see the development will be on the edge of an existing built-up residential area. And this is the proposed site plan showing the location of the proposed dwellings, parking arrangements, and the block plan as proposed. This is a street elevation showing you the proposed dwellings and proposed house type 1. You can see on the block plan there in the corner where that house type would be located. And again, house type 2 there, floor plans and elevations. And house type 3, the floor plans and elevations. And the proposed garage type 1, which is for one of the plots. These are the site photos. This is a view southeast across the site. And a view east across the site. You can see there where there's been trodden in pathways and the existing residential development. And again, looking southeast across the site. And a view north towards existing development, northwest. And looking northwest across the site again. And then you can see the fields to the rear. And again. And this would be the site access. And back to the location plan. So an application for residential development on this site has previously been refused for the erection of 4 detached 2-storey dwellings in November 2021. The latest application seeks to address the previous reasons for refusal and therefore includes the introduction of a wildflower planting and provision for a footpath zone, retaining the connection from the northwest of the site to the southeast and the cul-de-sac of Field Maple Road. It includes the omission of additional parking provision, allowing at least 2 parking spaces for vehicles for each plot. Parking provision integrated within the terrain so as to reduce the negative impact on the street frontage in order to address the refusal reason 2. In addition, windows have been removed on the relevant elevation of house type 2 to address the 3rd reason for refusal, which stated the plot 4 will sit significantly higher, resulting in unacceptable overlooking. And finally, the latest application includes the submission of a preliminary ecological appraisal to address the final reason for refusal. Watton Town Council have objected to this application on the basis of the loss of open space and overdevelopment of the site on the basis it would be overbearing, and there are also concerns regarding contaminated land. They've also said that the proposal does not relate to the soft edge of the current development and transition to the adjacent agricultural field. There have also been 24 letters of representation raising various concerns to the proposals, and these are outlined in the officer's report. In terms of the principle of development, the application site is located within the settlement boundary for Watton, which is designated as a market town within the Breckland local plan. Residential development in this location is considered to be sustainable and acceptable in principle, subject to all other material considerations being satisfied. There's also a fallback position to consider here. Part of the site benefits from an extant planning permission for the erection of 1 dwelling immediately adjacent to 43 Maple Road. That said, this fallback only forms part of the current application, and as such, while some weight can be attached, the wider proposals must also be taken into consideration, and the whole application assessed against the current local and national adopted planning policy. So it's the extant planning permission is for a smaller site area, whereas this is for a larger site area. In respect of the loss of open space, the site is currently undeveloped and open grassland with steps up from the public highway to access the area. It is privately owned land and has been fenced off. Clear pathways through the site are also visible and are clearly shown on aerial photography of the site, linking the site to other areas of open space within the wider development, as well as footpaths leading to the surrounding countryside and pathways into the town centre of Watton. However, it is noted that the application site has been fenced off for a period of time, and as previously mentioned, it's privately owned. As such, there's currently no public access to or through the site. During the lifetime of the application, a number of letters of representation from local residents have been received stating that this area of land is open space. Despite an extensive search of planning history for the site, it's not been possible to find any proposed plans or legal agreements which specifically tie this parcel of land into being designated open space. A number of representations refer to covenants restricting the use of the land. However, restrictive covenants are a civil matter and are not a material planning consideration. That said, it is clear from the evidence on the ground that the site was intended to be used as open space, albeit not formally designated as such. And therefore, the local planning authority must give some weight to the impact of the proposed loss on this space. It is also noted that the application site is proposed for designation as a local green space within the emerging Watton neighbourhood plan. However, this plan is still at the consultation stage. As such, it can only be afforded limited weight as a material planning consideration. Even if the land is designated, there is currently no means to ensure it can be used as open space or maintained. One of the reasons for refusal attached to the previous decision regarded the loss of open space at the application site and footpath links to Watton Town Centre and the surrounding countryside. The current application has amended the proposals to include a public footpath through the site and a new landscaped wildflower area. While some of the existing open space would be lost to development, the proposal would be maintained publicly accessible green links to the surrounding area, which would be secured via Section 106 agreement in perpetuity. Given the lack of existing formal open space or public right-of-way at the application site, connectivity and green links in the vicinity, which will be future-proofed for residents, sorry, I missed a line there, and the current lack of public access across the site, it is considered that the proposal will improve connectivity and green links in the vicinity, which will future-proof residents constituting sustainable development. In addition, it has been noted that there is a further area of open space on the wider estate, on the wider development site, which has previously not been maintained and has been the subject of untidy land complaints. It is proposed to gain a maintenance contribution and a Section 106 agreement to secure a nominated body and maintenance of this piece of open space. This, along with the open space on site and maintenance, is considered sufficient to outweigh any loss of unusable open space on the site currently. In terms of design and impact on the character and appearance of the area, the wider area is already characterised by built form, and as such, further dwellings on the edge of the settlement would not be considered out of keeping within the area as a principle. Impact upon the character of the area was one of the previous reasons for refusal. The current scheme has amended the proposal in an attempt to address the concerns previously raised. So in the officer's report for the last application, they outlined concerns that the proposed dwellings appeared somewhat crammed into the site and at odds with the wider frontages of the surrounding dwellings. The current application is supported by an assessment of plots across the site. This assessment demonstrates that the proposed plots are no larger on average than the majority of the plots in the vicinity. It has also been demonstrated that the proposed areas of amenity space, frontage widths, and the percentage of plots covered by built development are favourable in comparison with plots across the estate. As such, the impact upon the character of the street scene is considered acceptable. The previous refusal also raised concerns that the fenestration design on plots 1 and 2 sat at odds with the street scene, with the entrance doors to the side of the properties creating a disjointed appearance within the street scene. In comparison, the current application has redesigned plot 2 to show front doors facing onto the street. Plot 2 has also been reorientated, which results in the dwelling following the existing line of frontage development, in particular regarding the existing dwelling at number 43. Plot 1 remains as per the extent planning consent. The previous scheme proposed a heavy dominance of car parking to the front of plots 3 and 4, and also in front of the existing retaining wall at the end of the cul-de-sac. The heavy presence of vehicles was considered overly prominent within the street scene and of poor design. The current scheme has removed the 2 on-street parking areas, with parking now provided adjacent to each dwelling and integrated into the design. The number of car parking spaces has been reduced from 14 to 9 as a result. It is considered that the amended design is an improvement, with open space and landscaped areas replacing the parking bays. The previous refusal also raised concerns regarding parking provision for plot 2, which sat at the end of the cul-de-sac, with the occupiers having to travel up down steps to access the property and vehicles. Officers did not consider that the means of access via steps represented inclusive development, and thus was not considered to represent a good design. A ramped access is now proposed for the dwellings at plots 3 and 4. The current scheme includes a footpath to dwelling at plot 2. In light of these changes that have been made to the latest proposal, the impact on the designing appearance of the areas considered acceptable, having due regard to policies COM 1 and Gen 2 of the Breckland Local Plan. In respect of amenity considerations, the proposed dwellings at plots 3 and 4 would largely follow the front-to-back relationship found within the street, and as such, from this perspective, it is not anticipated that there would be any loss of privacy. The current application features an amended scheme which has removed all windows to habitable rooms along the north-facing elevation of plot 4, achieved by amending the internal layout of the dwelling and introducing additional dormers. As such, there are no longer any concerns regarding overlooking of the adjacent development, and the scheme is considered to be compliant with policy COM 3 of the Breckland Local Plan. In respect of highway safety considerations, the local highway authority have raised no objection to the proposal, subject to conditions. In addition, as previously mentioned, parking provision has been proposed in line with Breckland standards. In respect of contaminated land considerations, the contaminated land officers raised no objections, subject to condition. Ecology considerations, this was one of the previous reasons for refusal. They have submitted a preliminary ecological appraisal, and the council's ecologist has raised no objection to it, subject to condition. Therefore, the proposal is considered to comply with policy MV02 of the Breckland Local Plan. And in terms of flood risk, the site is located within flood zone 1, which is identified as being at very low risk of surface and water flooding. And therefore the proposal is considered to be compliant with policy MV09. Nutrient neutrality has been satisfactorily addressed during the course of the application process, as has GI RAMS. And in conclusion, the application is considered to be acceptable in planning terms and is recommended for approval, subject to condition, on the basis that the previous reasons for refusal have now been satisfactorily addressed. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Naomi. Well done. We've got James Watling, please, who's an objector, and Lucinda Scott James, who's also an objector. And Mr. Watling, you've got 2 minutes, sir.
What hasn't been pointed out is that for access to this proposed development would have to go across the private property of the houses of 43, 41 and 39 Field Maple Road. That end of the estate is a private road. It is, if you look at the title deeds. You've all sent a copy by email and by letter to this building, that private road is incorporated in the legal boundaries of those properties. That road has been maintained ever since the development was built. And so for 16 years, those residents have looked after that private part of the road. The road surface is totally different to the normal highway of Field Maple Road. It is a stone, loose stone surface, which is exactly the same surface as all the drives of every house on that development. At no stage has anybody from the developer approached the residents and the owners of this private road to gain access to build, and not only that, to give the right of access to the new owners of these proposed houses. If you grant permission for this to go ahead, you will be given the license for the deterioration and depriving of the residents of the legal right to protect their legal boundaries of their properties. Thank you.
Thank you.
You've got
Lucinda Scott James, please.
You've got 1 minute 20.
Okay, thank you. The parking had been addressed in the second application, but it's actually in the turning circle of the whole cul-de-sac, of the whole estate. So they're putting it there. There will be no turning area. Although the parking will be off, they'll be backing with their visitors for 2 cars each. They squeeze them up each thing. So I think that there's a safety aspect there of any kind of visitors or emergency services having to get in, that will all be blocked off. It's also being built up high, meters high. So it'll be the tallest one. I own the flats next door and they're 2-story. It's going to be taller than that, taller than the holding, dominating the whole site. It used to be a footpath, and it was interesting in the covenant. It states that you're not allowed to erect in the applicant's covenant, not allowed to erect any buildings and not use this space otherwise than open space, roads or footpaths. The applicant, Alexander Properties, bought this amenity space for Field Maple Road estate, which consists of a fenced green area in the middle and this banked area to the end, which they were meant to maintain and don't, for £2,000. And so I just don't think it was ever intended for that. It's going to be very hard on all the movement about it's. I can't remember where I am now. Oh yes, so much taller. It will have an overbearing impact on Field Maple Road.
We've got 10 seconds. The owners of property.
You haven't. No, you haven't. I gave you 1 minute
Sorry, I got a
30.
bit lost there.
I don't know what watch you've
Sorry, I
got.
panicked a bit.
That's okay, not a problem at all.
Can I have 10 seconds, Mr. Chairman?
Not by my watch, you didn't. You
I'm
had 2
asking
minutes
for
and the late,
10 seconds.
I gave, well, you
Yeah.
didn't have 2 minutes, you had less than 2 minutes, but then
Yeah.
I gave the lady, you said she's got 20 seconds. So I've done it. I don't want to discuss it because we could have had your 10 seconds. Okay, I've got Andrew Clark, please, who's the agent. You have up to 3 minutes, sir. Sorry.
Sorry, I forgot.
So,
that should be good, yeah. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman, councillors, members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. The application seeks to develop an unused parcel of land to form 4 dwellings. As the case officer mentioned, previous application of similar description was refused by Brecon Council, and since we have addressed all planning matters and worked with the local planning authority, and as such has been recommended for approval. Key matters raised by the public are loss of open space, and we should add that this land is privately owned and not formally designated as open space by the council. We view this land as developable within the settlement boundary, making effective use of unused land and form much needed family homes without encroaching into open countryside. As the officers report, the scheme is in accordance with National Planning Policy Framework and takes into account all of the local planning policies. Watton Town Council referred to density of the development, and we've provided a NOLI plan to demonstrate that the density is less impactful than the existing estate. which is as part of the design and access statement. The proposed properties are subservient to the adjacent development, and that can be demonstrated on the street scene elevation as provided. Many local representations refer to civil matters, which are not planning matters and should not be considered as part of this planning hearing. But small developments such as this are important for the local economy and the community, providing good quality homes built by local contractors and local trades. And development such as these in the wider Norfolk area have been stalled because of nutrient neutrality issues. And we see this site as deliverable with no adverse effects on the natural habitats. And to echo the case officer's conclusion, this is needed residential development. People are struggling to find quality homes. And this site represents an ideal opportunity for 4 new dwellings with no impact on open countryside, and hope you can approve this application today. Many thanks.
Thank you. Now I now go over to Rebecca, who has a comments from the ward rep, Councillor Cadell, please.
Thank you, Chairman. So I'm just going to read these comments out. Objection to Field Maple Road development. This is a very long, drawn out, contentious planning application and one that should have never have got this far. The residents there have been at the mercy of a developer that has not kept his promises to maintain any of the open space that is down there, nor maintain the roads or the pavements, all of which is in their title deeds that should be done. There are historic changes of ownership from different developers, and Breckland has had to in the past issue an order to get the grass in the middle of the site cut. Now we are here with a ridiculous plan for houses in the air raised up on a bank that has until now been used as open space by residents and is overlooking Wayland Wood. Firstly, my objections would start with the total overcrowding, of an already enclosed space. Secondly, the loss of the space that has been used since the original houses were built. Thirdly, the fact that the open space is in the title deeds of houses that are already there. Fourthly, there is an area shaded in blue that the development will have to cross. This is private access to the last few houses in Field Maple Road. There are 3 houses who have these on their land registry as owning the land. How will they build past this point? How will the houses be built? And how will they gain access to their properties? This point has not been addressed at all. Fifth, the fact that houses are to be accessed by a ramp and they will be higher than the existing ones is going to look ridiculous and put existing houses in the shade. There is a high level of anger how the residents have been treated by the lack of consideration to maintenance, and they have put up with a lot of mess and uncertainty, which is morally so very wrong. I know that this is not a planning reason for refusal, so I would urge the committee to think hard before letting this go through. I would like to ask that if this does go through, then can the planning department arrange an agreement whereby the residents have some security to the maintenance of what open space will be left on the estate, that a Section 106 agreement be sorted, holding the developer to account for his responsibilities. Councillor Tina Cadell.
That's okay, thank you. No, it is open to questions, but I'm going to take ladies first. I'm going to take Councillor Bowes and then Councillor Gilbert, and then I'll come to everyone else. Microphone, please. Yes. Oh, no.
Thank you. 2 questions. Firstly, I'd like clarification about exactly how the private property, the access across private properties will be dealt with, and what that involves. And then also, given the applicant's history, which is ongoing, of not maintaining open space on the estate which he owns, or which they own, including a large, very large piece which is in the middle, which is central to the original design of the original estate, I am sceptical about the maintenance of the suggested wildflower area, and would ask exactly who will be responsible for that. Cultivating such an area is particularly involved and requires ecological expertise, and is much more than time consuming than just grass cutting, which the applicant hasn't even managed to do in the past. And so I would like to know, I would like to know exactly who will maintain that wildflower area. Thank you.
Okay, now listen very carefully, because I'm going to hand over to Rebecca, but to just cover off this issue with regards planning permission and rights of way, etc.
Or land ownership.
On land ownership.
It is not a material consideration, members, for you to take into consideration the deeds or the land ownership. What you are considering in front of you is the principle of development in this location. It is possible to access the site, whether the applicants can subsequently, in the event planning permission is granted, gain access to the site. That will be a civil matter between them and those deed holders. That is not a material consideration for you to consider it today, how they get access to this site. That is purely a civil matter between them and the landowners and their title deeds. You can only consider whether the access is acceptable, and as per the committee report, the Highways Authority have no objection to the access across this site. And obviously, members, you can consider the layout of development, including the parking arrangements. And it is obviously our officers' view that those layout and parking arrangements are acceptable. It may be in the future they can't actually obtain those rights, but that is a civil matter and not for consideration. With regards to the history of maintaining the open space, we completely understand, Councillor Bowles, your position in that regard. I would reiterate what the case officer has already said, in that there is no legal agreement to secure the maintenance of that open space, or even for it to be open space in the first place. And therefore, what we are proposing to you, members, is that the loss of this space can be adequately mitigated against by the provision of the wildflower meadow on site, by the provision and the opening of the footway that will connect across the site into the wider parts of Watton, and also a section 106 for the central area of the open space to maintain that open space, and there will be maintenance contributions to go along with that. I also understand Councillor Bowles' point about, well, how will that happen? So members, just to give you some insight into the section 106 process. So our standard section 106 process requires a maintenance contribution, an open space scheme, and a nominated body. Those are all prior to commencement of development. So the applicants will have to come forward with an appropriate scheme, including mowing, planting, times, mulch, weeding, anything you can think of. They will also have to come forward with a nominated body, and then we have a set amount per square metre in terms of a maintenance contribution. For your reference, conversations with Watton Town Council are going ahead about them being the nominated body, but that will need to be acceptable as the local authority before we approve to discharge that clause in the section 106 agreement before they can continue with their development. So they will need to come to us with an appropriate maintenance schedule and a nominated body who to do that, and then the local authority can then approve or not. That being as acceptable means. And we consider that on balance, the loss of this open space can be outweighed by the future maintenance of that central piece of open space and the wildflower meadow and the public footpath. And through a section 106 agreement, we consider that we can secure that those things happen going forward, unlike the situation that's currently on the site. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Gilbert, please.
Thank you, Chairman. There's a bit of history. I've been involved in issues on this estate for many years, and that land should have been handed over to Bracknell Council. I have seen on Microfiche a document where they were talking about it, but this council didn't see it through. So the reason it is still in private ownership is because this council did not do its job and did not take on that land when it should have been at conclusion of the completion of that estate. Can I start with some photos? I'm a bit disappointed that one very important photograph was not shown, and that is from ground level. All the photos were up on the mound. If you look at it from ground level, it is 2 meters tall, this bund, which is all contaminated land. And the reason it is there is it is the soil that was scraped off that site before construction could take place. And the reason that developers did not use all the site is because it was a lot better to leave this contaminated soil on the site where it was not be disturbed, and that is why it is there. It is 2 meters tall. So we are talking about putting 2-story buildings on top of a 2 meter contaminated bund. And on the contamination, I'm very disappointed that there's no objection from our contaminated land officer. Who is actually going to, question here, who is actually going to do the survey on this land? are we going to do it ourselves, or are we going to rely on the developer telling us the land is not contaminated? Can I come on to the access to the site? It says on page 124, I think it is, the site is currently underdeveloped and open grassland with steps up from the public highway to access the area. Could you show me, please, where on the public highway these steps are? I think it's important that we actually get things right.
Are you asking whether they're there or what land they're on?
No, I'm asking that where are these steps from the public highway?
Steps from the public highway. It's a note in the agenda.
Yeah.
Mike.
Thank you. I see where you're going with that one, and that's an error on my part, because they're saying that it's a private road and it's the steps from that area as opposed to what is said as a public highway.
Yeah, that should have said highway and not public highway, from the existing highway to the site.
I'm back on. Like everybody else, I've had correspondence showing ownership of this land. But I would like to talk about the reasons for refusal last time. If I can read this out, is that number 1? The development will result in the loss of open space, which, whilst not formally designated as such, was clearly intended for that purpose at the time of the residential estate's development. And indeed, it is clearly used for such purpose today, with footpaths travelling through the link, which link up Watton Town Centre and surrounding countryside. As such, the loss of open green space would therefore be contrary to paragraph 120 of the National Planning Policy Framework 2021 and policy EMV 01 of the Breckland Local Plan 2019. There are no material considerations identified that would outweigh the harm. What I would ask is, what is so materially different between that application and this application that would outweigh the harm done? Because all I can see is the applicant has offered to scatter a couple of packets of wildflower seeds. And also, I'm wondering, and this is a question for Mr. Horn, what would the situations be if we approve this application and that land is then designated as formally designated as open space? What would happen if it was designated and this was refused? Are we in a situation where we maybe should not be determining this today, and that we should wait until the designation of that land is determined through the local plan?
There we go. That's who wants to go first? Because there was a question here, and then Mr. Horn. So do you want to do yours first, Rebecca, and leave Mr. Horn to think about that one? Oh, okay.
There's a lot there, so please pick me up if I miss anything. So with regards to the contamination, there's condition 8 of the planning approval that was recommended by your contamination land team. There was a desk study that was submitted as part of the application and reviewed by your experts councillors, which are your contamination team at the council. They're happy that the matter can be adequately dealt with by a contamination condition. That contamination condition that we use is a national standard condition, not just a Breckland standard condition, so it's used all over the country. and that requires further information to be submitted by the applicants. That information has to become from an accredited qualified source, not just the developers, and that is checked by your statutory consultees, which are your contamination team, and they would advise whether development in that location is acceptable and any remediation that's required. So your statutory consultees are advising you that the development in this location is acceptable with regard to contamination, and officers have had due regard to that in their determination of the application. Naomi's already answered the point about access for the public highway, for which we apologise for the use of the word public. Moving on to the recommendations for refusal, I do think Naomi covered this, but I'll cover it again. So yes, we did refuse it with regard to the loss of open space. As Naomi's already mentioned, that we've had regard to it being, you know, it was quite obviously in the original permission left aside as open space. However, regardless of the circumstances, that is not secured by way of a condition or a Section 106 agreement. Therefore, that land remains private land. It's now been fenced off. It's not publicly accessible. The council have no means to remove that fencing or require it to be laid out as public open space. And we certainly don't have any means to maintain that open space. Now, what we are suggesting to you as officers, and you're completely within your remit to take a different view to us as officers, is that having regard to the fact that we have no means of securing that long-term as open space, maintained or in use, or to remove that fencing, that this application offers, we consider as officers, an opportunity that does bring forward development on that site, but an opportunity for a very small area of open space on the site, which is proposed to be used as wildflower meadow. And we can secure that wildflower meadow as being laid out and maintained through the Section 106 agreement, as I've already proposed. Also outweighing that loss of open space is the opening up of that footway, which has always in the past been heavily used, which we cannot require the developers to open up in any other way. And finally, that central piece of open space that historically has not been maintained, we would seek to get that maintained through this Section 106 agreement also, and the monies, the maintenance contribution to do that. So in terms of that reason for refusal, we openly accept that there will be a loss of open space that was clearly always intended to be open space. But we're saying on the grounds that we can't secure it as open space, those matters that I've just laid out as the footway, the wildflower meadow, and the maintenance as a central piece of space, it is our view as officers and members, you're completely within your remit to take a different view, that those matters materially outweigh a loss of unusual usable open space in our view. Finally, with regards to the neighbourhood plan, not the local plan. So the neighbourhood plan has suggested in its early consultation stages that that area could be designated as open space, and that plan will continue. Members, you are required to make a judgment on planning applications and not wait for policies, and the NPPF is really clear in that regard. That neighbourhood plan at Wattham is at really early stages, and you've already heard from Naomi, you can only give that limited weight. There is no saying through examination that that space will ever become designated open space, and we're suggesting to you that even if it did become designated open space, the council has no means, even through the neighbourhood plan, to either require it to be used as open space, handed over to any other parties, or unfenced, unfortunately. And that is the reality why we're saying that that loss of open space can be balanced by those three things: the footway, the wildflower meadow, and the maintenance of the central space. So on that basis, members, as officers, we've recommended it for refusal. But if you feel recommend it for approval. But if you feel, members, that the open space and the maintenance and the retention of it in its current condition is not outweighed by those three matters, then it's completely within your remit to reach an alternative recommendation. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Coming back, Councillor Gilbert.
It's not only in the what neighbourhood plan, it has also been put forward for designation as open space in the call for sites. So it is on the table.
We certainly can't give any weight to the call for sites at this point in time, members. So just to be really, really clear, you mustn't give any weight to the call for sites, but I appreciate it has been put forward in that regard.
Thank you. Councillor Crane, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I've got this up now on a satellite and I've put it into 3D and I can see a real problem with the height of this piece of land. Is there any way we condition that is lowered to be the same as the floor level or the ground level of the rest of the houses? Because it is really going to be, you see all these steps, so it's going to be really high. Why can that not be brought down to the ground level? So at least that would restrict the height.
Would you have an answer to that as a developer? No?
Yeah,
Microphone, please.
Sorry.
Yeah, we're just working with the natural topography rather than removing soil from the site when we can actually work around it to make it financially viable. There is a street scene elevation that shows that the proposal is subservient, hence why we've looked at a design with room in roof, as opposed to a traditional two-storey dwelling.
Okay. Okay, well, sorry, Councillor, I'll take Councillor Gilbert briefly, thank you.
Yeah, the reason that can't be lowered is because there's all the scraped contaminated soil that was taken off the site. And at the time it was felt better to leave it on the site rather than transport it somewhere. And I think now you will find it very difficult to take that amount of contaminated soil anywhere. It would take an awful lot of big lorries a long while, because it's not only just that little patch, it goes from the back of the site right way through to the Christian.
Okay, point taken. Thank you. Councillor Wilkinson, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just one point I picked up from the lady who's a resident there. The turning circle, can you clarify that? If that was a condition, turning circle in the original, in the formal application, is parking places actually taking that up? Or is that?
I think it's a circle as much as a
Yeah,
turning head.
well, if it's a
Turning
turning
head.
circle and it's going to have
I don't think
parking
it's a circle,
spaces
I
on
think
it, that's taking that away. Is that?
No. Go on in briefly with your microphone, please.
The turning circle falls within the boundary of property of number 43. Number 43 actually owns that turning circle. It's shown on the title deeds at the land registry. He owns it.
Thank you. Thanks for making that brief. I'll have the agent as well who wants to respond to that. This is why we don't do this often.
There are no objections on highways grounds. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Rebecca.
I'm going to be really annoying and jump in as well. So there was a turning head at the end, but it's been moved closer to the wildflower meadow. And if you can just share your screen quickly. No, we can show you that, members. Sorry, nothing's quickly. I'll just show you that quickly. Why is it not working today? So as you can see, the turning head is now moved closer to the wildflower meadow, so it's just moved along. So you've still got the ability to turn at that end. And as the agents pointed out, the Highways Authority have no objections in that regard.
Okay, thank you. Yes, come back, then I'll take Councillor Bowes.
Yeah, thank you for that, because I didn't want it, I had concerns it would have been taken away. And the other thing as well, can slab levels be conditioned? Can we look at doing that?
Yes, I can. Okay, thank you. Councillor Bowes, please.
Sorry, right, okay, thank you. Sorry to labour the point, Rebecca, but can you please, I have assurance that through the 106 agreement, that large central area will be totally protected from any untoward use, and that it will be, kept maintained to very regular and schedule, and it will be as it was intended years ago when the original planning permission was given for the estate. Because I'd like that reassurance before I vote. Thank you.
I can guarantee you that we can write a section 106 agreement that requires that space to only be used as open space, and that we have a maintenance schedule and a nominated body and a maintenance contribution. So that I can guarantee you. And obviously then we have an enforceable section 106 agreement, which we don't have currently.
Sorry. Councillor Dale, please.
Just let me get it clear. What we're saying is if we approve planning, then the other will have to be fought out with the landowners, the developers as a civil matter. Thank you.
There we go. As I was told many years ago, and I know our solicitors here, that your neighbour could seek planning permission on your back garden, even if you had a good access within the settlement boundary, everything, wonderful. And they might get plan permission, but they can't build unless they agree for you to sell it to them. And I have been here before with many applications. Okay. No further questions from members? Thank you. Okay, we're going to take the vote on this particular item. So this is at Wattenfield Maple Road, 3PL 2022-0296, and it's a full application. Your officer's recommendation is one of approval. Can I show of hands for approval, please? 7, and those against? 3. Okay, this item's approved. Okay, thank you very much. Yes.
Could the officers look at conditioning the slab levels to address the concerns of the resident there who's actually in a flat and it's going to be lower? Yeah, well,
We've got a slab levels, we've added the slab levels.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Councillor Dowling, I'm afraid we've run out of time, but we're going to have to break for lunch, but you are welcome to join us as long as you don't mind being called Roger Attewell, because he didn't turn up. So are you okay? I'm saying you're okay with that. We have to break for lunch. Okay, I do apologise. We're going to break for lunch. It's 1:10. If I could have you here ready to start at 20.